Just a heads up, this is sort of a part 2. In a previous video I discussed why I think Warning is a contender for Green Day's best album. In that video I went into detail about the criteria by which I judge music, and I won't really go over that again because it took a while, but if you want to see how, then swing over by that video and check it out. You'll probably find it interesting if you find a video about why I think Nimrod is great interesting. And with that being said, this has been a surprisingly difficult video to write. It's my general goal to keep these video runtimes shorter than the album I'm talking about, because if the runtime's the same or even longer, why would you listen to my video when you can just listen to the album? In my previous drafts of this video, I've definitely been failing that goal. I'm trying it one more time though, and it'll be as long as it needs to be. Real talk is, no matter how often I've tried to ground or modify my opinions of Nimrod to be a little more quote-unquote realistic, my opinion has always ballooned straight back up every time I listen to it. Nimrod's an album that never gets old, and is, in my opinion, a perfect album. Well, it's more a subjective A-. I don't know if a perfect A album is actually possible, but this is incredibly close to one. The magic of Nimrod is all the elements that go into it make it an album that absolutely never gets old. It aces all 5 criteria I judge music by, and it aces them all with such confidence and ferocity that it just makes Nimrod a confident album that demands to be loved. And the strongest of Nimrod's many strengths is illustrated perfectly in the first 20 seconds of the album. Nice Guy's Finish Last begins with a palpitating drum, and Armstrong ramps up the guitar line in the background, building energy, but muted behind a barrier of hype. This elegantly drops off to a mic-turned bass line, bubbling and smooth, but Trey's drumming persists, still frantic in the background. And here, Armstrong's vocals take the stage, snide, condescending, and a little self-deprecating. While it's not that dominant quality that I was talking about, Nimrod's dirty little secret is on full display on Nice Guy's Finish Last. As the song keeps going, Armstrong's guitar line gets absolutely ferocious, but is kept in check by the mastering. Rather than letting it consume the song like on some songs on Dookie or Insomniac, his snide vocals take the center stage foreground of the track. The wheezed, almost screamed harmony makes this an incredibly melodic and catchy song. Its chorus snide, its bass is smooth, the drum line's punching, and right there, nice and apparent in the mixing, and never buried, is the ferocious guitar. I think this element to Nimrod is really important and can't be understated. The fact that it's ferocious but controls itself and gives its melodic elements plenty of room to breathe. It makes the guitar solo towards the end of the song not the finale, but just more rising action, continually building the hype of the album. That mastering ensures that at all times you can clearly hear every member of the band without ever having one member outshine the others. And, most importantly, it never sounds overproduced. Thanks to this auditory room to breathe, it's the little things added by Mike and Trey that make the song special. At its core, it's another repetitive pop-punk song from Green Day. Another repetitive pop-punk song in 1997. It's that the members of Green Day have incredible chemistry on this album, and they always have each other covered. There's never a dull moment or lacking moment, because even if one or even 2 of them drop the ball, there's always someone picking it up and carrying the song to above average. All in all, Nice Guy's Finish Last is the sum of its small but wonderful parts, and its insistence on building and building and building energy, but never letting the guitar dominate and take over, leaves you satisfied and really excited and open to more. Next song up is Hitching a Ride, and true to the music video, the melody of the song borrows heavily from a show tune Broadway vibe. After the appetizer of Nice Guy's Finish Last, Hitching a Ride is careful not only to not lose momentum, but to keep it building. The song is punctured and driven by a steady stepping melody, but the tempo, unlike how the kind of song this is inspired by usually is sure to keep that punk pace. Armstrong sings in his messy punk way that was typical for him at the time, but flexes his vocal cords out with a sort of grand vibrato not really seen from him up to this point, starting a dynamic definitely built on In Warning and most iconically American Idiot. Armstrong's voice is also kept in the background of the track, lending it a very dreamlike quality. But more importantly, Armstrong's voice being in the background of the track like that forces your hearing to tune in on it, sharpening your sense just a little more. After his voice drops off, you can focus on the crunchy guitars as they slightly intensify. The mastering of the guitars on this track is perfect, and I adore it. It makes the guitar hard and messy, but keeps the track perfectly clean for the bass line to be clearly heard, and for Trey's playful drum work. Because while the guitar and bass is a little more, droning than Green Day usually puts out, Trey's drum work is the heartbeat of the song. Thanks to your hearing being tuned in a little more just from the shift in mastering, as the song progresses and slowly intensifies, even though it hasn't actually gained any volume, the building tension is unmistakable. And then, of course, all the tension built from the last song and a half erupts in the guitar solo. The solo's tense, seething, anxious, and it erupts with all the energy built before reeling it back in to keep going with the building of the song, taking it even higher, with the guitar solo and the new additional harmony building into the foreground of the track, left reserved almost for this moment, before finally giving release with the repeated line, "Don't know where." Appropriately, the song ends with a little exhale in the form of a simple guitar riff. Insistent on not letting the energy die there, The Grouch is a fun, energetic, pop-punk song that drags you right back on track for the flow of the album. The guitar and Armstrong's vocals are both high-pitched and peppy, and Mike's springy, tinny bass line really seals the deal for me here. Instrumentally, The Grouch doesn't give a lot to talk about because it's just solid. The fast verses solidify the very quick pace for the album to come, and the harmonic sing-along chorus is just fun without sacrificing the instrumental integrity of the whole piece. Trey's drum bridge leads in perfectly, and the poppy power chords drive along almost like a proto-American Idiot. And the guitar solo is cheesy surf punk bliss while banging along with the incredible bass section. And while that tinny, reverby bass is my personal favorite part of the song, I think it's the lyrics of The Grouch that definitely seal the deal. They're potent, snide, and most importantly, incredibly creative and descriptive. And the unapologetic, kind of cleverly used vulgarity just makes the lyrics stick in your head and makes the song fun to sing along to. After 3 joyously fast-paced songs, the opening to Redundant is kind of genius, stretching out from the energy and continuity that was just created, slowly dropping in pitch, and then reintroducing the new, slower flow to the song. There are 3 things that really stand out to me about Redundant. The first, Armstrong lowly belts out those vocals and really takes the forefront of the track with nice harmony. The vocals are arguably the center stage of Redundant, and in that way I can see why people like one of my friends considers this a more pop song than most of the rest of the album or Green Day's catalog up to this point. It is the most common trope that pop songs do not rely on instrumentals and instead give the melody entirely to the vocals, and while there's a bit of that dynamic going on here, I still think that the instrumentals are the meat of the song. That leads to the second point, that Mike and Trey kind of take a step back in this song, which is sort of unusual for what Nimrod has established. It makes the song kind of unique in the album overall. Though to me they do step back for good reason, because onto the third point, Armstrong absolutely envelops the song's soundscape. His guitar line here is pulsing, ebbing and flowing, building energy, winding up and winding down. The song is rather repetitive and sticks to the basic generic 4-beat structure, but it's in the repetition and in the slower pace, directly in the face of the previous songs and the song to come, that Redundant makes its stake on the album. It's an incredibly important atmosphere setter. Almost the entire first half of Nimrod is a quick string of fast songs, and Redundant takes the important role of setting out some very important groundwork for the growth and experimentation that occurs on the second half of the album. Redundant in and of itself is a catchy and surprisingly dour song, pretty much about losing meaning as you're trapped in the repetition of a life that you've grown overly accustomed to, and especially apparently how that can suck the life out of a relationship. Up to this point, Nimrod has been fun, with 2 fuck you songs and Hitching a Ride, which, while discussing alcoholism, it does so in a way where the listener can be forgiven for not entirely catching on to the gravity of that. Redundant establishes Nimrod as an album which sounds joyous and energetic, but which is thematically incredibly dour, sensitive, emotional, and vulnerable. Yeah, as Redundant goes along and Armstrong takes center stage in the mixing, the guitars really overwhelm the mixing of the track, making it, ironically, even though it's rather poppy, one of the most in-your-face songs so far on the album, which is why I think it's incredibly appropriate and interesting that it's followed by one of the most low-key songs on the album, Scattered. With the sound charging in from the void of the nothingness of the side of the mixing, Scattered almost reboots the flow of the album. It continues off after the depressed, anxious statement of Redundant. Scattered lathers itself in subtle, well-executed harmony, reminding me of a classic beach track. The guitar line and Trey's drum work riding those toms really evokes a wonderful surf punk, pop punk vibe. Though while the vocals and especially the vocal harmony definitely take the focus of the song, interestingly, with how the song's mastered, none of the elements really become the forefront. All of them are held to the background or at least to the midground. It has a very interesting and wonderful effect of making you pay attention to the subtleties in the song again, which I think is really appropriate for an obviously classic surf-influenced song. A common theme I see when I see other people's reviews or discussions of Nimrod is that people think that songs like Scattered are needless filler. And while everybody is definitely entitled to their own opinions, and I won't try to take those away from them, in my opinion, I feel that songs like Scattered are simply the victims of being overlooked and underappreciated. Scattered does not jump out and force you to pay attention to it like Nice Guys Finish Last, Hitching a Ride, or The Grouch. Like I said earlier, it's a very low-key song. It's subtle. It's filled with wonderful little flares and creative things with the bass, guitar, and drum. The melody is memorable, soothing, and chill. And while the song keeps the tempo up, it's definitely incredibly chill. Scattered doesn't reinvent the wheel or make a bold statement, but if you're willing to pay attention to it, it's an incredibly wonderful little listen. And especially illustrating this point, the lyrics here are some of my favorite Armstrong has ever put out. They're rhythmic, poetic, sensitive, and honest. I don't want to just read the lyrics off, but seriously, I have the lyrics up on the screen or look them up and just take a moment and appreciate the song for what it is, even though it's not incredibly flary. It's a song about being hurt, about being left with nothing, and then, horrifically, opening yourself up, making yourself vulnerable again, taking all the chance of being broken again, because maybe, if you do, it could be alright. And on that happy note, melodically we get even happier, and lyrically we get much, much lower on All the Time. All the Time takes Redundant's idea of repetition as a means to an end and cranks it up to 11. All the Time is incredibly, incredibly repetitive. It's also a very fun song. All the Time, guitar-wise, simply switches between a 4-beat da-da-da-da and a little bit of a growing and shrinking action between that. The guitar is thoroughly backed up by the bass. Here they really kind of become one entity, and All the Time is a perfect illustration of why an energetic and catchy drumline is incredibly important to a song like this. If this song did not have the enjoyable tom, cymbal, and snare work that it does, I would probably hate it. Once again, it's the harmony between the members of Green Day that saved the day. The wonderfully purposeful repetition builds perfectly to the theme of the song. This one probably a little more evident, and if you've paid attention to the lyrics, you've most likely noticed it. Though again, with how the song is, you might not have paid attention to the lyrics. I've had friends that I've discussed the song with, and they never paid it much mind. I guess that's kind of the repeating theme on Nimrod. The songs that outshine certainly pulled your attention, and with 18 tracks, not every song gets the attention that it demands or deserves. Somewhat similar to Green Day's Strange News singles, All the Time is about being set up for a life that you don't want, a life of wasting away, and then raging against that with Green Day's instinct to party and have a defiant life. Regardless of what's responsible or right to do, they choose the path of fun and self-destruction. Choosing such a fun path still leads to time wasting away. Time ticks, you get older, life passes you by, and there's nothing you can do. Salute. Worry Rock, in many ways, plays like a sequel to Scattered. Instrumentally, while Scattered had everything in the mid-mix to the background, Worry Rock seems to try to get everything in the mid-mix leaning towards the forefront, with the vocals being the most far back. The vocals and guitar take a noticeably slower melody with a little bit of injection of energy from the guitar here and there, but the bass and percussion keep it steady. While the song has a cheesy, slow, almost 80s, almost ballady melody, especially in the pre-chorus and chorus, I can't call this song slow because the pulse and energy are just perfectly preserved by the bass and percussion. And then, of course, halfway through the song, the surf guitar line is so satisfying. It goes even harder to that style of music than any other song to this point in the album, though it was so perfectly set up by previous songs that it feels like a wonderful payoff. The lyrics are cheesy, sentimental, and the inverse of Scattered, where Scattered is about being hurt and opening yourself up to the danger of love again. Worry Rock is seemingly about being lost in the middle of love. Things have been going well, but suddenly have been going really rough. It's definitely a patch of everything going wrong, but at the end, with the sitcom cheesiness, Armstrong gives the wheel to the romantic partner in the song, and they decide to keep trying. At this point in the album, the triple hit of Scattered, All the Time, and Worry Rock have definitely shifted the tone, making everything a lot more almost serious and definitely emotionally raw, but still keeping the formula of short, catchy songs with a surf edge. The cheesiness plays and the song almost fades to black. What if I told you that a guitar could both be incredibly crunchy and incredibly bubbly? The next track, Platypus, might be my favorite guitar work from Armstrong ever. It's not that it's incredibly complicated or inventive, it's that it's super, super satisfying. At this point in the album, we slowly got in more and more, not slow songs, but definitely more tame, more mild, more relaxed. Though the album has never explicitly winded down so much that it's become an album of slow songs. Very importantly, it's kept the tempo up, so when Platypus explodes into life, it's unexpected, but satisfying and appropriate. To paraphrase my long-lost father, you may not have been expecting it, but your brain was. The bubbly, crunchy haze, that's it. It's perfect. We're done. Close the album, shut it down, we won. The lyrics are savage and just lead to a string of swearing, and that's great. The insults are creative, it's melodic in its ferocity, and it's a great, quick, angry Green Day song. And after that explosion is the perfect, pretty much, finale to the first half of the album, Uptight. Nimrod really plays that trick again here. Platypus lived mostly in the mid-ground of the track, and now in Uptight at the very beginning we have a bass and guitar line right in the foreground, right there for you to hear. That crunchy, hazy, very simple repeating guitar, the drum line sounding like Trey's about to break his stick clanging in your ear, and Billy's vocals wheezed out. To this point, Nimrod's been an almost bipolar album, switching between highs and lows within the same song, usually pessimistic, very self-deprecating, snide, angry, and dissatisfied. And that all pays off here on Uptight. Discord is what makes the song sound good. Again, Billy is pretty much wheezing and whining. The drum sounds like it's gonna break. The song itself does not sound factually or traditionally good. But those elements together make a weirdly smooth, harmonious vibe. None of it is really good, but it's all good together. Then the guitar ramps up, there's a little bit of bullet drumming, and we get the very first chorus on this album that's loud in the foreground. It's because of this that Uptight has a special trick of not having to be instrumentally amazing. All things considered, it's a pretty simple song. The guitar line isn't incredible, and it's repetitive and doesn't do a whole lot new for the album, but the simple, long game played with the mastering and vibe of having these songs continuing to build and build a mounting pressure underneath, but never fully paying it off until now, means that this simple little song gets to play the role of an incredible banger closer. That when the loud harmony and the echoing, almost wah-wah guitar brings you through the modest climax of the song, it really feels like you're raging and letting out this huge pressure that's been built. Combine this with the surprisingly mainly cheery melody of the song and you have a wonderful juxtaposition. This song is about being at the end of your rope and considering offing yourself, but coming back down from that precipice and deciding it's not worth it, you might as well just keep living. This song has such a weird vibe all around, and it's so hard to describe, because I want to describe it as cheery and fun and energetic, but of course, with all the elements I've already described, it's probably the best example of that elusive, hard-to-achieve duality in pop-punk, of the horrible lyrics with the fun instrumentals. With all the elements built up and grown to this point in the record, to have it all be allowed to be let out at the album's halfway point is really impressive. It's an incredible example of A-side, B-side album flow, even if in the new presses of this record, this is not all just one A-side and B-side and a split on 3 sides.
I think, thematically and musically, there's definitely a clear distinction between the first half and second half of Nimrod. Whereas the first half of the album is probably best characterized as a rapid-fire, quick succession of short and satisfying little stingers of songs. That was not alliteration on purpose. The second half of the album transitions into a series of big, individualistic statements of suddenly the album still keeps that wonderful flow that it had going on. Following the finale of the first half of the album with Uptight, the album sort of experienced a mini-climax, and following that incredibly thematically cohesive song. As the rager of that existential crisis dies down, the song is swept away in an almost ethereal, unmaterialistic bliss. Last Ride In plays almost like the day after a catastrophe, but instead of boiling in the terribleness that occurred, you let it all wash away. You throw yourself into the ocean, give yourself to the vibe of existing, and just refocus yourself on reality in a somewhat blind to reality way, if that makes any sense. This is a very important thematic moment for Nimrod, because even though it was an album that opened with a fuck you song, over the course of the A-side it strayed heavily into songs dealing with the relationships, and thematically started painting the picture of a person struggling with relationships who can't seem to win in life, sort of making the allegorical Nimrod, the protagonist of the story. Whereas following Last Ride In, I think the songs, if not directly, then more emotionally to the listener, become less intrinsically focused and more extrinsic. And while in a more generic, general sense, some people might consider that meaning the music is becoming more shallow, I think it's incredibly important to the picture that Nimrod paints in the end. Musically, Last Ride In begins like many another great Green Day song of this time, beginning with a simple, subdued, reverby bass line dominating the background of the track, bleeding into the midground, with some simple, subdued but steady drum work by Trey. Last Ride In is often praised as a cornerstone, a perfect example of the experimentation that Green Day did on Nimrod, but I think the secret to its success is that it is so in the vein of what was in Green Day's wheelhouse. Last Ride In isn't really that different from songs on Dookie or especially Kerplunk. Green Day had long been inspired by surf and bordering on the edge of surf punk, and Last Ride In's biggest difference is it commits itself, allows itself to be slow and mellow in its atmosphere for the entire song. But to me, it's not so different from things like the start of 80. Unlike songs like Burnout, Having a Blast, Longview, songs that take that basic Green Day surf-inspired formula and ramp it up with big escalations of emotion through escalations of sound, Last Ride In makes its statement by staying small, focusing on building and fleshing out intricacies, just fun and playful chemistry between all parts of the song. And to me, that fundamental flow of the song is irrefutable proof that Green Day can really understand how to make a song flow, the importance of how they time their escalations and the changes in the sound of the song. All in all, the song has the effect of rejuvenating the listener and is a big part of why the album can be so long, but feel so short. And it's worth noting that while I don't think that surf was too far away from Green Day's repertoire, listening to it, you can really tell how much they care for the genre. If you had never heard Green Day before and someone introduced them to you with that song, you'd think that they did surf punk or surf for a living, and they wrote their music all like that. It really never sounds generic and uses the tropes of the genre very effectively, like people who'd been writing in that genre for a long time would. This is not the last time I'll mention this on this channel, but one of my biggest pet peeves in music is when a band quote-unquote experiments with a new sound, but only barely scratches the surface of that genre, making an incredibly generic and samey sounding song that has no ground to stand on its own, but is celebrated as innovative for that band just because it's a sound they've never tried before. I guess for that, I think if you're going to do it right. The next few seconds of Nimrod are incredibly important, but also very easy to overlook. So I'll take a moment to point out what I think are the importance of the opening moments of the following song, Jinx. Following the slow burn of Last Ride In, Jinx is an explosion back to a more furious, fast, and loud punk. But the song opens with the very soft, muted in the background, 1, 2, 3. Setting both the tempo, of course, but also priming you to be expected for something a little more ferocious, since at this point it's a well-known cliche in music that counting off at the start of the song means something big is coming up. Jinx, despite being the explosion to life for the second half of the album, is one of the most transitional songs Green Day had written to that point. It would be easy to argue that Jinx doesn't have a lot to stand on its own, and it really doesn't have a lot to it. Of course, that does not make Jinx a bad song, it just has a larger part to play in the context of the album that makes it more special than it would initially be just removed on its own. The most noteworthy thing about Jinx and its big driving force is Trey's drum style on it. Trey can be a very flamboyant drummer, but on the song he chooses to keep it more refrained and instead more driving and impactful in the less drum beats that he makes. It reminds me of something more like that you would see on a Social Distortion record, if that makes sense. And punctuated between the verses, is a lot of cymbal writing. And the cymbal writing, of course, adds to noise and chaos, but not so much to the beat. And of course, Billy's guitar work is a lot more brash and heavy in a mastering sense than really anything to this point except maybe Platypus. The mastering not nearly as messy as on that track, and instead taking a more straightforward, hard edge. Though still kind of held back in the background in haze just a little, keeping it still reminiscent of Dookie more than Insomniac or Platypus. But then the song escalates. Trey breaks through the cymbal smashing with a lot of his more usual bullet drumming type style. Billy is joined by the other members with that trademark Green Day harmony, really lifting the track, making it feel more airy, and in that newly created space with the guitar backing off, a lot of Mike's usual flamboyant bass work steps more into the spotlight. Of course, through all the song, it steadily built energy, and as this kind of transferred from possible energy into kinetic energy with the escalating at the end of the song. They're careful to keep building that momentum, and before long, it breaks into the next song, Hashinka. Billy steps back to perform something a lot more usual and expected for him, and true to his stylings on the rest of the album, and the auditory space is pretty much completely given to Trey, and Hashinka is Trey's time to shine. For a long time, Hashinka was my favorite Green Day song, and it's now about my third favorite. And this song is some of the best pure musicianship and sense for the importance of chemistry, for the way instruments play off each other in an auditory space, that Green Day has ever put out. Hashinka is one of the greatest examples of timbre in punk music. For those unfamiliar, pretty much when things in a song have the same volume and loudness and tone, timbre is that other quality that allows you to differentiate the sounds. Important to timbre is harmony, but it's also shaped by things like vibrato, attack decay, a lot of music theory stuff that I won't entirely dive into. I think of timbre, to make it a little more concrete, as the texture and consistency of a sound. And while it isn't strictly timbre in the same way that your music professor would use it, it's an understanding of this trait of sound that really elevates the song above the rest of the album and above a large portion of their discography, at least to me. Billy's guitar throughout the song is all about the loud and soft, about building and dying. It flows up and down with weight through the verses of the song, almost like a wave, like an actual ocean wave. It feels like it has mass, and when it gets to the chorus and it breaks out into what could be a more generic pop-punk power thing going on, it's almost more like it crashes into the vocals and other components of the song. Mike's work is less flamboyant here than it can often be, but it serves an important role, and a lot more a traditional role to what a layperson might expect from bass. And then, of course, because this song is a shining example of the harmony, just a simple chemistry and appreciation for what the other band members do, and how every instrument has to tie perfectly into the song to make a totally fleshed out and impactful song, how all notes from all parties have to time together perfectly, is the spotlight, but not the focus or point of the song being good. Trey. I can only describe the drums here as fucking weightless. The drums are just masterfully produced to be allowed to bounce across the soundscape, one ear to the other, and create such a sense of movement and buoyancy. I almost want to describe it as halting and starting, but that would create the entirely wrong impression. It's more like it's tumbling through the air or water, dropping back down, being swept back up, and ebbing and flowing up and down, weightlessly, effortlessly, and chaotically. Chaotically, but totally elegantly. I know, how many words can I use to describe a pretty simple drumline? With this song, it's just so easy to pick out which particular notes they're playing, to imagine exactly what they're doing. There's so much care for everything being audible, so everything can connect to everything else. At least to me, with my weird and nerdy obsession for music, it's as satisfying to watch this song come together cohesively and work together in this brilliant whole as it is for some people to watch a magnificent painting come together, or watch someone effortlessly pull off a perfect run in a video game, or arrange all the scenes and components of an otherwise strange movie to make it incredible. But it's how when they really try, they can be examples of some of the best harmony and chemistry between band members, and such great respect for cohesive and holistic songwriting. This is why I love Green Day, and why I consider them one of my favorite bands. And it's just perfect. Hashinka is admittedly a tall order to follow, and Walking Alone has the displeasure of being the least good song on the album, though that doesn't at all mean that it's bad. I'm sometimes really torn as to if the song needed to be included on the album. I think it serves a very important role of checking the flow of the album. If it exploded straight from Hashinka to the two fast songs coming up, it would completely screw over the more elegant flow that the album has in its last minutes. So while I appreciate it for doing that important job, I also think it might halt it a little too much. Isolated, there's nothing I don't like about this song. I think Billy's vocals are perfect for what it's trying to be. But even though it's a very short song, due to such a change it is between the song it came after and the song coming after it, it still feels a little long. And I don't know, maybe if it was shorter, it would have worked better in the flow of the album, even if the song itself would have flown and not quite as well. And I don't know, maybe if the song was a little shorter, then it might have flown better in the entire work of the album, even if it as a song would have suffered a little for it. There's a lot of discussion on the internet over what is Mike Dirnt's best work. A lot of people have different opinions, and of course that will happen with someone with a lot of great material under their belt. Often said in things with a massive cast of characters like The Simpsons, or Game of Thrones, or Star Trek, that every character, even though there are so many, is someone's favorite. In a similar vein, though not as extreme, there are a lot of different opinions over people's favorite bass line by Mike Dirnt, but one that I never see brought up enough, considering some weird choices some people have, is Reject. The bass work in Reject is absolutely what nails the song for me, what seals the deal. Just looking at the guitar work on its own, it's pretty similar to the songs that you'd hear on the end of Dookie, and it could probably fit nicely along them, even though the flow of the song is a little more broken up, a little more halting, more like hard rock or grunge than the pure punk influence that Dookie took. But that works masterfully for the song because it allows the guitar, even though this is a harder and more driving song, to not take up the complete forefront of the audio space, and instead Mike takes it. The bass on the song is so low, so metallic and sharp, so thudding and vicious. While it's reminiscent in some ways to the bass work to Come On Warning, it really stands out among Mike's work. It's easily his angriest song. This also allows Billy to be a little more light with the guitar work, and consequently a little more ratty, keeping this a more straight-up punk-feeling song. And in contrast, the following song, Take Back, is definitely more influenced by straight-up hard rock. The guitar work completely shifts into the space that the bass work was occupying, with a very droning, manic, firm, and strong sound. The pairing of these songs together is simply wonderful. Perfect. In the context of the flow of the rest of the album, after the steady building of the sort of, I'll refer to it as the A-side, the first half of the album, going to a grand finale with Uptight but still leaving room, oozing into Last Ride In, and then building up again with the Jinx Sashenko walking alone, building up a lot of tension that needs to be paid off, a lot of building energy that needs to have a finale. We sort of get that with the Reject and Take Back, because these songs are certainly enjoyable and very satisfying, especially in regards to fulfilling the promise that the album has made to this point. But Reject and especially Take Back are such quick biters that it leaves you wanting more. If the album just ended here, it wouldn't be very satisfying. But thankfully it doesn't. But what these songs really do is provide you with a satisfaction, a gift for getting to this point, and really sort of encourage the listener to give Green Day a little bit more leeway to allow them to do something more weird in what's to come. And they definitely do with the next song, King for a Day. If there had been any other sort of build-up to King for a Day, it would feel completely bizarre and out of place. So far into a pretty holistic, pretty focused, and not far from standard Green Day album. The absolutely charming thing about King for a Day is right from the start, they sell you. This is a ska song, they're fully committing to it, and they'll give it their all. It goes further to the weird sort of style of like weird gimmicky 1940s, 50s, and 60s joke albums than even a lot of ska is willing to go. It sells how fun the song is, how self-aware they are to the goofiness of it, and how much they commit to it, how aware they are that they're committing to this, and that makes it one of the most endearing, enjoyable, and charming Green Day songs. It makes it feel a little less shitposty like some of the goofy stuff back from the days of Kerplunk and Dookie, and more like a focused, concerted, very concise, well-thought-out, and intentional good time, even if that kind of sounds counterproductive. Even if you don't like ska, this is a song that will probably sell you on just itself, with its identity. It's been a while since I focused on the lyrics, mostly because the instrumentals of this album, especially on the second half, are so strong that they kind of take the spotlight and my focus, but also because they aren't necessarily what make most of the songs on the second half great. Jinx has really fun and clever lyrics, but is pretty much just a fuck you, you're stuck with me song. The sort of thing that you'd see on Insomniac, just a little more tongue-in-cheek. Sashenko is a what could have been song that pretty much dominates the trilogy later. Walking Alone is a sort of self-aware self-pity party. Reject explores more of that societal and political angst that they first really dove into on Insomniac. Take Back is a good old-fashioned fuck you song, and they're all pretty standard for Green Day's wheelhouse, but King for a Day, in complete contrast, is kind of a shock, or at least I imagine it would have been in a pre-King for a Day world. Green Day fans nowadays kind of know that this is part of Green Day's identity now. King for a Day is a song about how fun it is to cross-dress. They aren't mocking it, it's not self-anxious in any way. They poke a little fun at it, but in the way that Green Day will poke fun about a lot of things about themselves. This is just a song explaining why we get to see how cute Billy is in those little dresses. As cheesy and cliche as this might sound, it honestly does feel like a song about self-love and being your unapologetic self. This is still a sort of risky thing to say on the internet, so I'll keep it simple and vague. I'm LGBT. For those reasons, the song especially vibed with me. And considering I grew up in a very small town America, where this kind of stuff isn't widely accepted or even particularly known about yet, the song played an important part in me developing to who I am. But that being said, I'm not telling you to have a political stance. I'm just sharing my bias and experience and feelings with the song. I'm not saying you have to support a certain thing or that you don't have to. I'm not telling you how to live, you don't tell me how to live. Sounds good? Sounds good. If there is a weakness to King for a Day, I think it's just that even though they totally sell the ska thing, as it gets further along and into the saxophone, or I think that's the saxophone, I'm not a brass expert or woodwind expert, but as they get to that part of the song where Jason has his solo, it isn't as selling or convincing. You can tell he doesn't do this a lot, so it isn't anything absolutely incredible. And as I've seen live recordings of the song, they definitely come to sell it a lot better in the live show, and probably partly because he got a lot more experience by that point. So it's a minor detriment, but it doesn't ruin what was going on at all. And next up is Good Riddance. I think Billy first wrote the song back in the Dookie days, and when he did, he was very self-conscious about it, and was hesitant to share it with the other guys. Though once he did, they reassured him, and they thought it was really good. They recorded a version of it around the Insomniac days, but of course it didn't go on Insomniac because it totally did not match the theme of that record. But they re-recorded it, and it ended up here on Nimrod. I'm just 20, so I wasn't really around for the Good Riddance mania. I hear that a lot of people don't care for the song because it was overplayed at every prom, at every homecoming, at every wedding, at every event about good memories. Thankfully, I don't have that experience. I first heard this song in my teenage years. It was not ruined by overplaying, and I got to enjoy it for what it is. And Good Riddance is a very good song, even if it's not worth the extreme amount of hype. I think Good Riddance works so much because it's a pretty humble song. It's a very simple acoustic thing, and then later they add in some strings, and that's it. Sometimes when you listen to acoustic music, it can just ooze pretentiousness. You can tell that the person who wrote it just thought it was so grand, and are doing their best to make you notice that too. It's a big problem I have with a lot of modern indie music with acoustic elements. From the very start of the song, where Billy messes up and says fuck, to the way the song is played, just a little harsh in its notes, not at all a perfect little acoustic melody. And of course his absolute caterwauling, his raw, rough manner of speaking that keeps the song so grounded and down to earth. Now music is up to interpretation, and everyone interprets stuff differently. A lot of people see Good Riddance, Time of Your Life as a breakup song, or a song about graduating, or songs about just relationships and times coming to an end. Personally, I've always felt that it's a pretty obvious song about death. You know, it's something unpredictable, but in the end was right. I hope you had the time of your life. That it's a song like Jar about one of their Death Wish friends that died. I might be totally wrong. That might not be what Billy meant at all, but music is largely what it is to the listener and what it conveys. And that's what it means to me. And that's what it meant to Christopher, a punk who hasn't been with us for a long time. He is who this video is dedicated to, and I want to shout him out here. And on that happy note, let's move on to what used to be my second favorite, and is now I guess my fourth or fifth favorite, Green Day song of all time, Prosthetic Head. Nimrod was a fun, fast-paced album that saturated itself in the vibe of bummer, of growing older, of existential angst, of things ending and needing to move on. All of the emotion that it's worked so hard to wind up has to explode somehow, and the finale they cooked up is pretty perfect for it. Though sadly, sometimes there are songs that I struggle to explain, and this is one of them. I'll give it my best try though. Prosthetic Head lives in the dynamic between loud and hard, incredibly hard for Green Day at this time at least, and with the sharp lyrics. Nimrod has great lyrics throughout, but here, they are the perfect, colorful, potent finale. Sort of similar to Walking Contradiction, Prosthetic Head is a song about a specific type of person, at least as surface value of the lyrics. Awful stuff, red-blooded a mannequin, which is an amazing metaphor. Do or die, no reply, don't deny that you're synthetic. You don't need to know a lot about Billy Joe's politics to imagine the type of person this is about. And on a greater level, this person also kind of exists independent from politics. This song uses very simple musical cues and tactics, but uses them very effectively, and after the excellent album flow and building up to this point, a very effective song is really all you need to make it feel amazing. The song starts quiet but sharp, not softened at all. It's potent from the get-go with feedback filling one of your ears. And as the song explodes with a roaring, rearing guitar, with galloping drums, with punching bass, and Billy absolutely bellowing lyrics, then explodes to a much smoother but still loud and ferocious second half to the chorus. The return to the verse is just so chill, so vibe, just capturing a feeling not unlike Longview. And it's a building back up to the ferocity that makes this song at the end of this album just a perfect note to end off on, with the more power pop-punky chords near the end, and the build-up before the final drop-off and finale. The song, at least to me, kind of even moves past the specific target it's pointed to and brings home the feeling I get from this album, and of course you don't have to agree, that the real Nimrod was inside you all along. That everyone is the Nimrod. That Nimrod is just the state of being a person.